We are quite convinced that the general public, tech and industry leaders, as well as most scientists, feel secure that we humans actually have no efficient or of-scale way to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. We claim and prove in this video and series that we humans firmly have in reach a costless way to remove all post-industrial carbon dioxide from the atmosphere in a surprisingly short period of time, certainly in less than 20 years. Instead of focusing on carbon dioxide one way or the other, we prefer to focus and alert for an alarming rate of degeneration of all our productive soils, which is as much as 13 billion hectares. This when only the productive agricultural lands are considered. 13 billion hectares roughly is 2 times the size of the continental USA, or 2 times Europe, or 2 times the Amazon forest across South America. Well, until 2050 90% of this immense and for human health thriving and existence essential area will have become irreversibly unproductive. The most surprising thing about this is that nobody seems to talk or to care about it, so we 8 billion or more modern humans could very well be in for a very ugly surprise. This unless we urgently wake up for this challenge, and use our immense but unrecognized potential to turn this and other threats in thriving and solving. As an example, an unmanaged tropical forest, and that includes certain planted forest, and above all the carbon agroforests, produce roughly 30 metric tons of biomass a year, and per hectare. When expressed in carbon content, that roughly is the yearly production of the equivalent of 30 tons of carbon dioxide, for instance as of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, including the carbon dioxide emitted by the burning of fossil fuels in the past, today, as well as in the future. So if we transform only 7% of our most degenerated or already unproductive agricultural land in carbon agroforest, we would be transforming, and much more importantly regenerating roughly 1 billion of hectares of kind of new land, this if well done, into probably the most biodiverse forests ever known. In theory, this could become 13 billion hectares or even more in a limited number of years. But even by proposing a more modest 1 billion hectares of carbon agroforests would remove roughly 30 billion tons of carbon dioxide per year. Please notice that this amount roughly is the amount of the yearly accumulation of carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere, with most of it being the result of the burning of fossil fuels, but also, the bias more critical considered, and rapidly increasing degeneration of soils. In other words, even if the burning of fossil fuels would become zero, our actual practices would lead to substantial, possibly to even higher carbon dioxide emissions. As said before, it is not the carbon dioxide emission that we see as the main challenge, but it is the immense and kind of exponential soil degeneration that we see as the main challenge, in fact a direct challenge for human and animal existence. Besides, as explained just earlier, soil degeneration could and probably will become our main source of future and massive carbon dioxide emissions. This makes that solving soil degeneration should be an absolute priority in order to avoid human and animal extinction. It should also or even more be considered a priority, because apart from its importance regarding existence, it also is the basis of human thriving and health. In other words, we see the action plan of transforming 1 billion hectares of degenerated and eventually already unproductive soils into carbon agroforest as kind of mandatory, that is if we humans want to thrive and stay healthy, and we see carbon dioxide removal rather as a logic but beneficial collateral of the principal aiming, this through an action plan, for all humans to remain thriving or to thrive more, as well as to maintain or to improve our health, and, consequential our life expectancy, as well as a minimum of natural birth rates, aspects that especially rather recently became clearly challenged. Brazil's agricultural land area, including crops and pastures, is estimated to be around 250 million hectares and it produces around 10% of all food of the world. Only 10% of the carbon agroforest's capacity used for food production. If only 10% of the carbon agroforest capacity would be used for food production, and assuming carbon agroforest produces 100 times more biomass, that would make that 1 billion hectares of carbon agroforest would produce 400% of all the food 8 billion humans consume today. Now we reach out to an earlier calculation made in an earlier video, and further we will base on the assumption that carbon agroforest produces 50 tons of wood or for biogas production suitable biomass per year and per hectare, compared to the about 30 metric tons of biomass for a standard tropical forest. Simply because a carbon agroforest has a much deeper and more fertile soil and on top of that is managed for additional production as well as dedicated production. The evidence for this is presented in other videos. Again, if only 10% of the carbon agroforest's capacity used for natural gas production, 50 tons of wood or biomass per year and per hectare will result in 18 tons of singers or over 16.2 tons of natural gas. 1 billion hectares of carbon agroforest will result in 360 million tons of singers and over 324 million tons of natural gas. That is close to 60 times the yearly production of Yemen, and more than the global natural gas production, that amounted to some 4.08 trillion cubic meters in 2023 or 300 million tons of natural gas. So the production of 1 billion hectares will, on top of the additional food or on top of the 400% of all the food 8 billion humans consume today, produce a further 100% of the actual global production of natural gas. As said, any actually produced and consumed gas provenient like from, for example, Yemen is fossil gas, and when burned or used will obviously emit carbon dioxide. None of the natural gas produced by the here proposed or any other agroforests will cause an increase of emissions, because months and/or years before the burning and consequent emissions, the amount equal to or equivalent to the expected emission would have been already captured from the atmosphere. So the burning of agroforest natural gas is a sequestering factor, but we do not include or consider it in this video. Furthermore, contrary to traditionally produced natural gas, carbon agroforest natural gas does not contain toxins. Still 80% of the carbon agroforest's capacity remains available. We would like to remind you that up to this moment we have given a destination to only 20% of the production capacity of the proposed carbon agroforest area of 1 billion hectares, or roughly the size of the Amazon forest. Obviously, this tremendous potential could form and be seen as a clear challenge for several industries and companies, including international industries and companies. In fact, and just for instance, the bicarbon agroforests produce superior and 100% or even over 100% renewable gasoline plus, as well as other superior and also renewable fuels could make the transition to electrical cars, hybrid cars, and the whole so-called clean energy redundant and unnecessary or possibly much less economic, efficient, and or even more dangerous. On the other hand, the leaders of the above-mentioned industries and or companies and or even of governments could very well envision that involvement in this massive new market could be much more lucrative or be more lucrative in a much shorter period of time, compared to any other economic activity. After all, it is about the basics of everything humans need, with quite some of the mining and or production of these basics being fundamentally challenged. We are quite convinced that the dedicated drone market for the management and harvesting of these carbon agroforests is much bigger and much more secure than that of electrical vehicles or any other type of vehicles. We insist to remind that carbon agroforest can produce masses of all basic materials we 8 billion humans need, obviously in a sustained and toxic-free way, and apart from healthy and organic foods, that includes the most modern or the most actual of basic materials, like for instance amongst many or in fact all others, graphite, carbon fiber, gasoline plus, hydrogen, electricity in all its forms, as well as possibly surprisingly rare earth elements and other materials in high demand.